In my opinion, editing is just about half of photography. The way you edit, the decisions you make editing your photo can dramatically change what the photo conveys to the viewer and just overall the quality of the photo. In some cases, editing can take a photo that is sort of average and turn it into a much better photo, just by capitalizing on the good things that are there and focusing on eliminating the things that hinder the photo. But when you start editing, jumping into Lightroom for the very first time can be a somewhat daunting task. There's a ton of sliders, a ton of different tools, and you may not be exactly sure where you're meant to start. Well, what I want to talk to you about today is where to start editing a RAW photo in Lightroom. And for this video, I'm gonna assume that you're shooting in RAW. That's where most of the power of editing comes from, is the capabilities and the information contained in a RAW file. So for this, I'm gonna assume you're shooting in RAW, and let's talk about where to start when you're editing your first RAW photo. So when you bring a RAW photo into Lightroom for the first time, your objective, first and foremost, is to bring out all of the detail contained in that RAW photo. RAW photos can hold a ton of photo information, and that means you can bring a lot of detail out of RAW photos, but you have to do a little bit of work to get there. And that's what I want to talk to you about. That's one of the most crucial steps in your editing, is building a good foundation with your RAW photos. And the way you do that is using three things. It's going to be your exposure, your contrast, and your white balance. These three things are really going to set you off on the right foot in your more creative edits. So let's start with the first of those, the exposure. I picked this image because I think it's a great photo, and then it's also well exposed across the whole image. There's nothing glaringly wrong with the exposure in this image. I really could leave it just like this and it looks like a great photo, because we had good overcast light, so the light was even and soft, and so there's not really any part of this image that's exposed improperly. This top right corner is bright because it was like 4 in the afternoon, so I mean, it was, you know, it was bright, but it's not glaringly wrong. So for the exposure, I'm not going to do a whole lot. For most of my images, I will bring the highlights down and I will bring the shadows up. And what this does is it just brings out a little bit of extra detail that I can then play around with in my edit going forward, but you have to bring it out before you can use it. So highlights down, that helps my top right corner, and the shadows up helps details in these darker areas, like in the hair and stuff like this over here. It helps with this tree and stuff like that. So just brings out a touch more detail that you can then play with later, or you can sort of hide later if you want to. The next step, we're going to talk a little bit more about contrast. Our exposure is great. Let's talk about contrast. Almost every photo I bring in Lightroom, I do a little bit of contrast just using the whites and blacks slider. Adding this contrast with the white and black sliders puts me in a good position to then play with my contrast more specifically using the point curve in just a minute. Increasing the whites and decreasing the blacks adds contrast. So just rule of thumb right there. There's probably a more detailed explanation that I could give, but there's not really a point to do that right now. Whites up, blacks down equals contrast. And so just a hint, just a little bit. When it comes to creating contrast in Lightroom, most people are going to opt for creating an S-curve. So what is the S-curve? Well, the easiest, simplest way to think about it is the point curve is a line that goes from the darkest part of your image to the brightest part of your image. So here are the blacks down here, here are the brightest highlights over here in the top right. And now when you create an S-curve, you are bringing down the blacks and bringing down the shadows, bringing down the blacks, and you are bringing up the highlights, bringing up the whites, like we did with the sliders right here. It's the same concept. You're just playing with your highlight, shadows, midtones, your whites and blacks. So when you create this S-curve, it's decreasing the blacks, it's bringing them down, making them richer, and increasing the highlights, making them brighter, and that creates contrast. So when I do my S-curves, I usually tweak the fundamental basic shape just a little bit because I like something a little bit more nuanced than just a plain S curve, I will usually bring this bottom point up to about 3.1. You can see that as you drag it in the bottom right. You can see what value it's on right there. I'll usually bring that up, and that brings the blackest blacks up just a little bit. It adds a little bit of fade, which just makes them a little bit softer. I'll usually bring this black point up just a little bit because I think this down here is a little too much for me. So I'll bring that up like this. I will bring the midtones up just slightly, this middle point here. I'll bring the highlights up this direction just slightly. And then the very brightest parts of the image, I will come over here and I will bring them down like this direction, and I will bring it over just a little bit. And what that does is it creates a really nice smooth fall off in the highlights. Instead of them being very harsh and bright, instead it's like adding a little bit of fade to the highlights. It just brings them down, makes them a little bit smoother, a little bit softer. I personally just think that looks good. So now you can see our S curve is just a little bit different. We've just tweaked a few things to get it exactly how we like it. Now the last element of our sort of big three in creating a good foundation is your white balance. I shoot on auto white balance, which some people might not like to hear. I think it works great. The reason I do it is because cameras have become so advanced that they pretty much nail it every time. It's not often that I have to tweak anything about my white balance in Lightroom. Sometimes if I'm going for a very certain look, I will have to do it, but for just my regular run-of-the-mill photos, I rarely have to change my white balance in editing. This photo I think looks great. I might warm it up just a hair. It's at 5800 right now. I might bring it up to something like 5940, something like that right here. I mean, I don't think it needs any tweaking really at all. And I'll probably bring down the tint just a little to combat any, excessive magenta. But I think this is a great starting point to then jump into our creative, stylistic edits. I'd give this photo a crop and then I'd be ready to go. Understanding these three parts of your editing is going to make a giant change in the quality of your edits and your ease of editing. As with anything, you want to start off with a good foundation, and it's exactly the same in Lightroom with your photo editing. Photo editing can be a daunting task to people, but it really doesn't have to be. Understanding the reasons why you need to do certain things and tons of practice is going to make photo editing way easier, I promise you. I hope this was helpful. I really encourage you to get into your editing suite and practice. Pull up a bunch of example photos and edit them. Get comfortable with doing the things we talked about today, and it will make a huge difference in your editing. Thank you guys so much for watching. As always, a like is super appreciated and helps me out a ton. If you care to stick around for more videos similar to this one, go ahead and subscribe. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll catch you later.